From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome to this week's episode of the DuView Podcast. I am your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and this week, hopefully, folks, I have finally figured out video. Hope that's something I've been working on with the podcast for a little while now since its beginning, and hopefully, like I said, I've swapped cameras, I've done some stuff, I've messed around with things, so hopefully, if you're watching on YouTube, you can also see me now. That's the hope anyway, and so we'll see if that comes to fruition or not, or if not, I'm going to be getting in contact with some friends who are a little bit better at video recording and editing and all that stuff than I am. But that being said, today's episode, as you can tell, there's no one else here with me, is a solo episode. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about Moxie. Not the, the inherent underlying ability if you have Moxie or if you have Chutzpah or if you have, some gumption or something like that. But the actual, for those of you who may not live in New England or may not be familiar with, there's actually a soft drink or a soda called Moxie. And I have a can of it, right here in the studio with me. And before I get into the episode, I will be cracking that open. But Moxie is in a lot of ways is Maine's beverage. You want to talk about Maine in a bottle? Well, open up a can of Moxie and take a sip. Like I said, I'm real partial to Moxie, love the beverage. It's something unique, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit more in this episode of Moxie is very much a generational beverage in New England, specifically the state of Maine that I can speak to. It's, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but it's something that is definitely passed down generation to generation, which in a lot of ways makes it kind of special at the same time, too. But, here in episode 42 today, I'm going to try and tell you guys, like, the story of Moxie, how it came to be, and the origins of the history behind it might surprise a few people. And so we're going to go ahead and, like I said, highly recommend this episode. If you don't have either a can or a bottle of Moxie, I'll give you, it's kind of like the Running Down a Dream Tom Petty album. I'm going to give folks a quick opportunity to go stand up or sit down and grab themselves a can or a bottle of Moxie, or, pause, go to the store and grab yourself a Moxie. And I'm going to go ahead and crack mine now, and we'll get started. There we go. Nice little Moxie here. Take a little sip. Oh, that's refreshing. Love a good Moxie. Love a good Moxie. But anyway, episode 42, Moxie, Maine in a bottle. So our story really begins in the later days of the 19th century, specifically on July 16th, 1885. This is the day that Augustine Thompson, specifically Dr. Augustine Thompson, the creator, I guess you could say, of Moxie, got the trademark number or the patent number 12,565 for a new product that he at the time called Moxie Nerve Food. So I guess the kind of unique thing with Moxie is that it started out in a lot of beverages that we drink today, or the ones that have history, they started out as like a cure-all, or, this beverage can help you cure insert ailment here, because in like the late 1800s, guys, medical science, as you could imagine, was not as developed as it would be as the 19th century, or the 1900s and the 20th century would create many explosions in progress in that field. But specifically, you had a lot of folks, either whether it be, Coca-Cola, where they used real cocaine, or, insert other drink here that, again, is still around today, but started out as like a medicine. And the same thing is true for Moxie. As I said, he tried to, Dr. Thompson coined it the Moxie Nerve Food. Thompson's trademark was not a trademark, so to speak. A lot of the other substances and beverages, like I had just been describing, had a lot of interesting ingredients, so to speak. But Thompson prided himself on his trademark for his cure-all being there was not a drop of medicine in it, poison, stimulant, or alcohol in its composition. So he was very proud of what he put into his beverage, or what he put into, his product. And so, while that covers the science side of the thing, or like, the chemistry side, the science side of the beverage. How did it get its name? Did it just happen to be a good word? But no, actually, there's a little bit more of a, I guess you could say, a personal connection in that for Dr. Thompson, who or rather where he would get the name for this beverage. So according to legend, as it was, Lieutenant Moxie was actually a friend of Dr. Thompson. And his friend traveled the world. He was quite wealthy. They said something about in looking online for this episode that he had some in the early days of like oil speculation and different things like that is where he made his money. But Lieutenant Moxie, again, it was a friend of Dr. Thompson's. They served together in the Civil War, or they had some connection there, because Thompson, as we'll find out later on, did serve in the American Civil War. But basically, during his travels, specifically Dr. Moxie's travels, when he was in South America, he discovered a specific root, and that's Genetian root. And after finding that it had positive reactions to his nervous system, he shipped back the root to Thompson. And again, I'm giving like the Spark Notes, so to speak, version of this story, but it's definitely something that is interesting, and that is kind of different in that way. That again, the man is literally traveling the world looking for the composition to make Moxie. And again, I find it kind of funny too that I don't know what you could consider a positive reaction to one's nervous system. I'm not sure how you quite measure that, but according to Lieutenant Moxie, and as a further extent, Dr. Thompson, when the shipment returned back to the United States, specifically Lowell, Massachusetts, in New England. This whole story takes place right in New England, and when the root came back, they basically said that this root, along with the other parts of Dr. Thompson's cocktail, cured anything caused by nervous exhaustion, stop the appetite for intoxicants for old drunks, stop insanity, blindness from overtaking, from people being paralyzed as well, and something along the lines of a loss of manhood from uses of excesses. Again, this is using the old terminology for more modern ailments, I guess you could say, as well as make you able to stand twice the usual amount of labor with less fatigue as the average man. Was not claimed nor medicine nor a stimulant, basically harmless as milk. And again, creates another interesting thing. So you're like, well, you said he was in Massachusetts, but Dr. Thompson, again, how does this connect to Maine, I guess is what I was getting at. But Dr. Thompson, while he was doing all this work and doing it in Massachusetts, Lowell, Massachusetts to be specific, he was actually originally a Mainer. And so this is kind of where the Maine ties into Moxie as a whole, and really just kind of like, creates the connection, or, makes it understandable why there's a connection there. And so, uniquely enough, Moxie's creator lived in Massachusetts. He was actually born in the town of Union, Maine, November 1835 to be exact, and he received his education and spent many of his formative years in the town and the areas surrounding Union, Maine, which is lovely. And eventually, the nation would find itself in the midst of a civil war in the early to mid 1860s, and Dr. Thompson, or just Mr. Thompson at this time, served in Company G of the 28th Maine Volunteers. He served about half the war and was was honorably discharged. He had many accommodations for valor. He was a really, I guess, as far as you could go for that time period, a stand-up guy in the battle, or in a tough time in society, or in the American history, really, not just American society, but in our history. He also was a teetotaler, working to find cures to alcoholism, and so this is kind of what spurred, I feel, a lot of his work. That was the teetotaler movement was big after the Civil War. Trying to get away the temperance movement, and as the whole, like the dangers of alcoholism and different things like that, was a huge problem in this country that folks really talked about quite a bit at that time. If you read any old newspapers or any old anything from that time period, you'll see the meaning of the Temperance Club. For this instance, he specifically Thompson was a teetotaler, and like I said, really was just trying to find a way to combat alcoholism and combat some of the other issues, but again, also probably make a buck, as a lot of folks were doing back then. This was not like an unheard of activity or an unheard of profession. You had these chemists or whatever you want to call them whipping up these concoctions all throughout the United States. I guess this just happens to be Maine's most prominent one that also hung on and became more than just the medicine that it was. But the popularity of Moxie would skyrocket as we got into the later part of the 1800s. And right before the turn of the century, you could see Moxie wagons going from town to town across Maine and really across New England. The Moxie brand was quickly expanded from just the simple drink cure-all to Moxie lozenges, medicated wafers, Moxie syrup. Bottling operations at this time even opened up as far west as St. Louis. Part of the success for this, the early stages of Moxie, can be accredited to the advertisement and the ad men as they like to call them of the time. If you ever kind of see the AMC show Mad Men, minus the dramatizations, a lot of that type of stuff. There is a lot that goes into a successful ad rollout program, especially in this time period where, you have such a you have such a pull over your consumers because, again, there is limited amounts of, or at least by the time the 1960s rolls around, there's a limited amount of television. At this time, you have nothing but really print and, the early infancy stages of radio advertising. So you got to understand at this time period, you got to really create something that's unique, really create something that really kind of catches, the public eye, so to speak. And so this is something that's easier, said than done. And it works pretty well for the Moxie company up until about the 1930s, which in 1929, you have the Great Depression. And really, that just started to be, I guess, the undoing of the Moxie company at that point. After the Second World War, however, we see business did not quickly return as probably was expected by the owners at the time. Like I said, the company fell on hard times, and by 1960s, Moxie had been acquired by Monarch New Grape and moved its operations to Atlanta, Georgia. This is the home of the Coca-Cola Corporation, and sales remained pretty solid in the New England area, but bottling remained regionally based. So again, as Coca-Cola Moxie kind of started to play in the big leagues with Coca-Cola, with Pepsi, and some of these other sodas, quickly it became realized, and this is just my opinion, it became realized that the regional aspect of Moxie was really what helped get it going. Moxie was never going to be a big seller in California per se. It was never going to be that nationwide beverage, and that's just something that came with time. But again, Moxie still does very, very, as we'll continue on with the story, we'll see that Moxie does very, very well in New England and the surrounding areas, where it doesn't do very well once you get outside of New England. And really the only people that kind of keep it alive outside of New England are people from New England that have since moved to these other areas, whether it be down south or whatever it may be. And so once, like I said, once Moxie gets acquired by Monarch Beverages, which was really by the end of the day, by the time, Monarch ends up selling Moxie down the road, they really just became this massive conglomeration of like niche kind of beverages from, regional beverages from all over the country, whether it be, Doc Pops, root beer, or whatever in down south, or sarsaparilla in the Midwest, or whatever it was. Maine just happened to be, or Moxie just, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Moxie just happened to be Maine/New England's more regional beverage, which we'll see a little bit later. As things change for the Moxie company specifically, and we'll also kind of discuss how Moxie ties into the state of Maine and everything else that kind of goes along with that. You're probably wondering, dude, we are so far into the story and you have not said the state of Maine or connected back to Maine yet. Don't worry, guys, it's coming. It's all part of the story. So again, as I kind of had said, Moxie's time under the Monarch umbrella of niche drinks performed well in New England, and after selling of the Monarch brand to a large French company, Moxie had become really kind of lost in the maze of niche regional soda drinks or regional beverages. However, in 2007, Moxie returned to New England, basically back to its roots as much as one can, as it was purchased by Cornucopia Beverage out of New Bedford, New Hampshire. So now Moxie is now owned again by a company that actually operates in New England, but the Cornucopia Beverage is a subsidiary of Coca-Cola. So technically, you could say now that Moxie is under the Coca-Cola family of beverages, just in one of their subsidiaries, way down, way down the line. And I guess I'd say that that's probably the best place for Moxie, as you'll see, and as this next part of our story will kind of illustrate here, really, which is unique in a lot of ways because, again, Maine is a unique place, and so is the things we drink. From, Allen's coffee brandy to Moxie, we definitely have a distinct palate up here, guys. That's for sure. And the unique thing, I will do a quick plug here, guys, before we transition into the more Maine-centric part of the story, is the whole history of Moxie. From, like I said, the creation of Dr. Thompson's cure-all beverage to the Moxie carts. They actually have pictures, and I think they actually even have one in person, is down at the Matthews Museum in Union, Maine. I have not been myself. I would like to go. Like I said, with COVID and everything the last few years, it's been tough to do some of those types of things, but that kind of ties into the whole reason why I was doing this episode, which I'll explain a little bit later, is not just because I love, the drink that is Moxie, but also because it's a great source of tourism. It's a great source of there are a lot of Moxie people out there, and it's an interesting thing, and there's a lot of history associated with it, and it's something that, frankly, allows us local people to celebrate, something that we can call our own, but it also, can allow us to put ourselves on the map a little bit and say, this is from Maine, this is our, our beverage, so to speak. And that's really, to kind of, I guess, give away a little bit of the story. That's really what one gentleman ended up doing. As Moxie was struggling to find its place, as I said, amongst all the other niche regional sodas, one man really kind of allowed his love of Moxie to really kind of flourish and really kind of become provide a final home for Moxie and a place for people to congregate every year and really kind of show their love for the beverage. So we'll unpack that next in this part of the episode, which I'd like to call, is struggling to find a place or struggling to find a home. Like I said, Moxie admin tried everything in the 1900s to move more of the product, including even bringing in legendary baseball player Ted Williams as a spokesperson or as a, kind of an ad, like, hey, if Ted Williams says, make mine a Moxie. I actually have that. They have a tin signs. They've recreated some of them. I actually have that tin sign. Anybody that went to college with me saw that. And it now hangs above my little wet bar that I have. Cause like I said, it's really cool. They really tried to do everything they could to really make Moxie a seller, especially in New England. Like I said, bringing in Ted Williams and other, local folks that really tried to get Moxie to sell. Like I said, as I've said previously in the episode, Moxie failed to really sell well outside of New England. However, in the town of Lisbon Falls, Maine, the owner of the Kennebec Fruit Company, Frank Anticetti, is responsible really for bringing back the drink to the state of Maine. Like I said, Mr. Thompson, Dr. Thompson, the creator of the beverage, was originally from Maine and eventually moved to Massachusetts. And as the Moxie company grew, he eventually stopped practicing medicine. He was a doctor, stopped practicing medicine altogether and focused solely on that. But again, things had changed by the time we have Frank Anticetti and his family, his folks from Lisbon Falls, Maine, really kind of enter the scene. And this is in the 1970s by this point, so... like I said, that's all started, and like I said, you can still go there today to the town of Lisbon Falls, and the store that used to be, or what used to be Kennebec Fruit Company, is now, I think, solely like the Moxie soda bar type place now that you can go to. And again, best time to do that would probably be in the summertime, as that also coincides with the Moxie Festival, which I will get into a little bit later. It really comes out of this whole story, frankly, too. So like I said, after the phasing out of his town's Frontier Days, which I believe was like an old home festival celebrating the town, celebrating, how far the town has come, the history, all that type of stuff, appreciating, where your town had really kind of come from. After the phasing out of that, Frank convinced his father, to bring up Moxie, as well as an interested individual by the name of Frank Potter. And they, like I said, they knew that there was an interest in the Moxie beverage or in the Moxie, taste, I guess you could so to speak, in the area. They knew it existed, and they wanted to really kind of tap into it, so to speak. So at first, they sent out postcards about having Frank Potter up at the store, and trying to get people to come back for Moxie. And this is the 70s at this point. By the 1980s, Potter would return again, and an official event would come out of this, would be carved out of it, including the Lisbon Falls Chamber of Commerce, as well as other community organizations and such. And so, really, I mean, you have, like I said, Frank Anticetti and Frank Potter really to thank for bringing this into the mainstream and really kind of getting this going back in the 1970s and 1980s. And then you fast forward to the more modern day. By the time 2005 rolls around, then Governor John Baldacci signed a bill making Moxie the official soft drink of the state of Maine. I didn't, to be completely honest with you, as much as I'm a fan of Maine history, and actually even personally knew Governor Baldacci, went to school actually with his with his son, and ended up meeting him through a family member of mine who was the head of the Democratic Party up in Aroostook County in Maine. But regardless of that, like I said, everybody in the state of Maine. Case in point, right here. But thank you to Governor Baldacci. I can't say his governorship was 100% filled with all good things, especially with the recession and the running of monies. But I can say that was probably one of the best things you did, sir. Thank you for solidifying Moxie in the Maine Constitution, so to speak. And like I said, that just really kind of embodies really the spirit of it. We've really adopted it as something that is ours. Again, it was made by a Mainer, made really for kind of Mainers in a direct or indirect way, and really just kind of took off from there. And like I said, is still alive and well today. And like I said, that festival that I mentioned that was started, or that the gathering in relation to Moxie, well, that really took off because for the last, prior to the COVID, many years, they had the Moxie Festival, which is 3 days of celebrating Moxie. There's a parade. There's a whole there's pictures all over the internet, and I'll be sure to share some when this episode comes out. I definitely hope to be in attendance at the one this year, which I'll get into a little bit more in a second. But people ask, aside from the acquired taste that comes with the drink and the area, it's kind of niche. How does Moxie really get spread, or how do you bring more people into the fandom, if you will? And I think that Moxie is more than a beverage to a lot of people. It's a shared experience. It's passed down from fathers to sons, mothers to daughters, and from past generation of Mainers to future generations of Mainers. It's Maine in the bottle, after all. And those of us that live here and enjoy the beverage kind of know what I mean. And I actually want to read an excerpt from this great book that was purchased for me by DuView podcast friend and former guest, Mr. James Talalas. He was great enough to buy me this book, which is where I got the name for this episode, Moxie Maine in a Bottle by Jim Balmer. Mr. Balmer, thank you so much for putting together such a great piece on such an important part of the state of Maine. But this excerpt, I'm going to read to you, actually comes from a great Mainer, in my opinion, Gary Crocker, who was a Maine humorist before there was, Bob Marley being not the reggae artist, but the comedian Uncle Bobby. There was Gary Crocker, and he really kind of summed up Maine in a lot of ways with humor. But I really like how Mr. Crocker puts it. And so to quote Mr. Crocker here from, like I said, Moxie Maine in a Bottle by Jim Bauer. I am a true Moxie lover, and you will always find an ice-cold Moxie in my refrigerator. Stop by any time and see for yourself. I was taught to drink Moxie by my grandfather, Russell Cram of North Monmouth. I say taught because, as you know, Moxie is an acquired taste and cannot possibly be appreciated in a single setting, especially if it's your first encounter with Maine's official soft drink. I often comment on unusual tastes of Moxie in my performances and do my best to prepare the audience with their first encounter with this marvelous drink laced with Genetian root extract. I don't want them to be put off at their first attempt, so I warn them that it tastes a little bit like root beer that's gone wicked bad. And if it's not enough, I tell them that if they are having a party or expecting 6 friends and they want to be sure each guest has at least one can of soft drink, they should get a 6-pack of Moxie. They might force one down, but they're not going to ask for another. By the way, I don't try the Moxie energy drink. It tastes nothing like Moxie. It tastes nothing like Moxie. It tastes good. I just like all the things, the other energy drinks, which is just the point. Moxie is unique and stands alone in the cola wars. It never goes on sale like the other sodas because if you like it, you'll pay whatever it costs to get your hands on a can. And if you don't like it, you wouldn't drink it even if we gave it to you, which is why I always kept Moxie in my refrigerator when the kids were growing up. I knew I would always have a soft drink when I needed one because the kids wouldn't touch it. Thank you, Grandpa Cram, for teaching me to drink Moxie. It is more than a soft drink. It is a statement about who we are in the state of Maine. And the name is used around the globe to indicate someone who has guts or chutzpah. I think that says it all. Dr. Augustine Thompson from Union started something when he introduced Moxie Nerve Toxic onto the market, and we continue to reap the benefits. I think I'll take a break and have a Moxie right now. Don't you know, mister? Now, I don't think, again, close quote, I don't think I could have put that any better. Because, again, my own personal experience, thank you, Mr. Crocker, my own experience with the drink is pretty much how he described it. It was passed on. I remember my dad, Mr. Tony Dumont, sharing his first Moxie with me. And even my grandfather before, on my mother's side, it's something it's just generational. It's just something we're about up here. And like I said, if you're from afar, come through. I'll buy you a can. Like I said, I'll happily buy anybody's first Moxie for him, as I did even when I was in college. I remember going to the Market Basket down the street from St. Anselm College, and I didn't know at the time that Moxie was made in Bedford, and so I was like, wow, I hope I can get my my favorite soda from home. And lo and behold, I could. And that's what makes Maine and New England really special, folks. It's not just the Moxie, but it's the people that make it together, and all of our special little customs and things like that really kind of make, again, this area, Maine, New England special, and Moxie is a huge part of that, especially for those of us here in the state of Maine. So I guess to really round out this episode is part of the reason I made this episode in the first place is I really wanted to bring attention back to the fact that there is, a Moxie festival. There is, as a matter of fact, for the first time since COVID, the 2023 Moxie Festival is going to be July 7th to the 9th, with a special theme this year: peace, love, and of course Moxie. Really trying to embody some of your hippie Woodstock kind of ideals, along with Maine's favorite soft drink, and I think that's, like I said, really tremendous. And like I said, it's more than just a soda; it's a culture. It's a generational connection. Like I said, it's Maine in a bottle or Maine in a can, guys. And for those of you who haven't experienced Moxie in all of its glory, I highly recommend it. And for those of you who don't like it or find it gross or anything like that, well, maybe you'll try it again sometime and change your mind. So that being said, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this special little episode on Moxie. Like I said, hopefully everything worked out here camera-wise, so we'll have video for the episodes coming up, and I'll be in touch with all the social medias on what's coming up new and everything like that. And in the meantime, guys, keep up to date with us on social media, the DuView podcast, and like I said, everything there, guys. Just keep up to date with us, keep sharing, and like I said, I'll be back here with a new episode with a guest pretty soon here, and I'll be sure to share all that out here as soon as possible. Thank you for tuning in to this special little side project episode, I guess you could call it. It's definitely shorter, but like I said, just wanted to get things focused back on Maine a little bit here and just kind of, get ready for the spring and for everything that's going to be coming here, guys. And so thank you for tuning in, and thank you to all the folks that provided information to make this episode possible. Really appreciate it. Been great. And like I said, we'll see you guys another couple weeks here with a brand new episode of the DuView podcast. Be sure to keep up to date with everything, like I said, on our social medias, guys, and we'll see you here soon.